Well, UFC 265 is lurking right on the horizon, and hopefully by the time this comes out, it's only about 1 week away. And it's a really interesting card, I feel like. You have an interesting fight between Derek Lewis and Cyril Gane. I'm probably saying that wrong. And we get to see Amanda Nunes fight, who's always just fun to watch.
Well, Nunes was supposed to fight on the card. In reality, Nunes tested positive for COVID, and her fight is canceled. Aldo Munoz now takes the co-main event spot, and we add a fight against Bobby Green and Rafael Fiziev, said that wrong, to the card.
I do feel like there are some questions that come with this card. Mainly, why are Derek Lewis and Cyril Gane fighting? Why is Lewis not just fighting Ngannou? Why is Stipe not just fighting Ngannou? But I don't get paid to make the decisions, and that's all I can really say about that. Well, we begin with a very similar sound when it comes to the last early prelims. 10-1 Kid Kavembo Munoz looks to put a 1 in his UFC win column against 7-3 Afro Samurai Simmons, looking to do much the same. 3-inch height and 1-inch reach both go to Munoz. Once again, looking at two fighters without wins in the UFC, so my data here is mostly based on whatever I can find. Immediately looking at what I could find, Munoz is the fighter who has actually gone the distance between the two in the UFC, and has definitely shown better skill when it comes to takedowns and grappling. Since in his loss, he was able to generate 9 minutes of ground control. Additionally, he was able to lead insignificant strikes, but did lose total strikes landed. So that's kind of the difference between heavy strikes versus quantity, which is just something interesting that I feel like is important to look at really for any fight. On the other hand, Simmons is coming off a loss to Giga Chikadze, KO, TKO. There's a lot less data here. He did defend one takedown from Chikadze, but with only one attempt, I can't say too much. Simmons did work the clinch, but it wasn't too long in this fight. So picking a winner here comes down to what I can actually see in terms of the UFC. Munoz is the Vegas favorite, and I am going to agree, mostly based on the fact that he was actually leading in significant strikes and was able to control the ground for 9 minutes. Simmons didn't seem like he was fully tested in his ability to survive on the ground. The next fight is the 7-1 Draco the Great Dracolini, which is the stupidest name so far I've done. Rodriguez takes on the 9-5 Vendetta Morales with a 5-year age gap and a 1-inch height favoring Draco, but a 1-inch reach to Morales. Once again, these two fighters haven't been the most successful inside the UFC as both have a single win. But that said, Morales is in fact the more experienced fighter with 5 fights, but he has shown the ability to hang in there when it comes to striking and has some degree of durability, as his strikes absorbed is only 0.06 less than strikes landed. With that said, he also has a 55% on takedown defense, which I feel highlights a very large weakness, especially in mixed martial arts, where it's a mix of martial arts. Rodriguez has a lot less to look at, but based on what I see, I can't tell jack. Rodriguez has shown the ability to submit and take down, but when it came to strikes, he went 9 compared to 11 on significant strikes before being knocked out. Like I said, it's a little difficult to talk about Rodriguez here, but I feel like this is a fight where it comes down to what happens where. It's ability that ends up with where the fight happens. It's in Morales' best interest to keep it standing, but that being said, I'm going to follow my status of ground game favoritism. I'm going to pick Morales because I do feel like a ground game will overcome Rodriguez. That 55% takedown defense I feel like is a fairly large weakness. If he can exploit that, get him on the ground, go for submission, or even just control the entire fight from on top or just dominating ground, I feel like he'll end up winning. Next up is the 8-4 Fury Leonardo taking on the 6-0 Melissa Gatto, with even height across the two fighters, but a 6-year age difference favoring Gatto. Now, this fight is the debut for Gatto in the UFC. Based on what I was able to find, she shows skill when it comes to grappling and submissions, but the ability to also go the distance. She doesn't have to finish it on the ground. She can go throughout. With Leonardo, I do have a bit more information, and I can definitely say that they prefer the ground to striking, considering the strikes landed are less than the strikes absorbed. Not great. Even then, her grappling doesn't have a whole lot of information about it, with 3 in her Dana White Contender Series win and none in her KO loss. Not a whole lot here, I feel like. This fight realistically goes to the ground, and it comes down to probably who gets it first and can control position. I really do struggle with judging this fight. Based on looking at what I can, I'm going to fold and follow Vegas odds. I am going to pick Gatto based on really nothing but this gut feeling. I like her grappling and submission skill looking at her record outside the UFC. I like looking at that and seeing both fighters want to go to the ground, and if Gatto's comfortable on the ground, Gatto will be fine going down. She's not going to resist the takedown probably that much. She'll probably fight it, maybe attempt a guillotine to force her off and take position there, but I like Gatto for this fight. Next up is the 15-6 Starboy Nape taking on the Jamaican sensation Osborne. Osborne taking a 2-inch height and 5-inch reach advantage. That doesn't measure up normally. Now, Cape is looking to get his first win in the UFC, and through his 2 losses has shown some skills off when it comes to takedown defense and a decent ability to handle himself on the ground. With striking, it does come apart a bit, as he has a tendency to get hit more than he hits, which is never a great combination. Comparing it to Osborne, who does have 2 wins and has shown a bit more of a well-rounded high quantity of strikes landed, the ability to take down and submit opponents, it is important to note that Osborne has actually never gone the distance. He is either finishing the fight or getting punished in the first. This gives Cape the opportunity to get the fight how he wants it if he can drag it on for as long as possible. Osborne probably has the conditioning, but the question is, will he burn out quickly? Will he burn out if he tries to go for the finish consistently? Can Cape just survive and avoid and make it to the next round? It's an interesting thing to look at, but it's still kind of a toss-up. But despite the difference in record, Cape is the favorite. I am going to disagree. I'm actually going to pick Osborne based on the explosiveness and the finishing power. I know I said Cape's best interest was to go, but as I've also said, Osborne is explosive. And Cape has shown off takedown defense and handle himself on the ground. With striking, though, that's the issue. And Osborne's a finisher who likes striking. So if he's going to get hit more than he hits, he's going to be punished. He's going to be beat. And it's not a great combination. I do think Cape can win, though. I will admit that. But I think Osborne is probably going to win this fight based on the explosive striking and power. Menafield-Herman is the next fight. And this ends the early prelims with the 10-2 Atomic Menafield taking on the 26-14 Short Fuse Herman. Explosive matchup last seen at Chernobyl. A 7-year age difference favoring Menafield. Additionally, Herman takes a 1-inch reach advantage, but that feels a lot less notable. Menafield comes into this as a definite finisher, with only 1 of his 7 fights going to decision. Aside from that, his striking defense seems a little poor. More strikes are absorbed than landed. A definite practitioner of the swing and bang style. But as I say that, he does have a submission win using the Von Flue choke, but grappling is not something that he uses incredibly often. I don't know how much of it is part of his game plan or if it's just something he has in his bag of tricks to throw out when it gets there. 1 takedown across all his fights so far is all I have to give that opinion. On the other hand, Herman has a few more fights and definitely seems to be more of the submission finisher. This is, again, a matchup of striking finisher, submission finisher. It's a fun matchup. At the same time, he can hang on the feet. He has the same issue as Menafield, strikes landed equals strikes absorbed, but he always seems to end up on the ground with Herman choking somebody out. So he seems to be more of a, I'll take 3 shots to the face to get you on the canvas. This is another one that I feel like is interesting for both fighters. Both kind of have that kill or be killed mentality. Of course, one puts his arm around your throat and chokes you out, and the other knocks you out. It does make it difficult to decide, and the Vegas odds reflect that. They have it close, favoring Menafield, and I think it's more difficult than that. This is, again, one of those, where does it end up? Menafield can keep it standing, which he can. It's an 85% takedown defense versus Herman's 45% takedown accuracy. But if Herman proves to have the toughness, he can get it down. Back on topic, though, I am going to favor Menafield here. Something about the way his stats lined up, the way he fights, his power, his durability, I like that better. The 85% takedown defense. I think Herman's got a good shot, and I mean, 85% leaves room for error. It only takes 1 time to get choked out on the ground. I just feel like Menafield has a better chance of keeping it on the feet and keeping his advantage over Herman. But now we're actually into the prelims. And we start off with, oh God, 12-6 Carolina, last name I will not even try to pronounce, looking to rebound against the 13-5 Jessica Pena. There's a 3-year age difference favoring Carolina and a 2-inch reach advantage going to Pena. Carolina, in her losses, has been handily outstruck. And that carries over into how her striking percentage is basically even across the absorbed and thrown category. Aside from that, she does have the ability to defend takedowns very well, but with her wins, she generally tends to be the leader in the situation. She handily outstrikes somebody, and not really close wins, I see. Pena, on the other hand, is much more of the grappler in this scenario. She has more strikes absorbed than thrown, but a greater percentage of takedowns and this ability to work the ground. That's not a lot to say here, but picking the winner here is difficult, and because Vegas odds have it literally dead even, I don't have my easy out available, but I am going to go with Carolina based on how poorly Pena's striking's defense seems to be. And Carolina's 75% takedown defense is a good number to look at in this scenario. While she has been handily outstruck, that doesn't seem to be an issue in this fight. It doesn't seem to be major that Pena is going to want to keep it on the feet. She's going to want to go to the ground. If Carolina keeps it on the feet, she has the advantage here. If she can outstrike Pena, if she can keep the pressure up, if she can not go to the canvas, I think the ball's in her court.
A last-minute addition to the card, we have the addition of the 27-11-1 Bobby Green, taking on 9-1 Rafael Fiziev. 2-inch height advantage to Green, but a 7-year age gap favoring Rafael. Now, Green is a definite well-rounded fighter, a solid striking percentage with a solid difference between strikes landed and absorbed. Additionally, has a solid takedown game and defense, averaging a 1.56 takedowns across his career, having 72% takedown defense. However, it does seem incredibly important to note, Green does not seem like he's a finisher as of late. He does have a lot of finishes on record, but lately in his fights, it's not been going to finish. It's been going to decision again and again and again. But on the other hand, Fiziev is much more of this heavy-duty striker. The now familiar strikes landed equaling strikes absorbed, the old swing and bang style. But also, he seems to have some major finishing power, with the majority of wins coming by decision, though. So basically, 2 out of 3 are his decision wins. Not exactly great. But it's an interesting matchup between the grappler and the striker again, one of those kind of fun ones. And with both fighters seemingly not great at finishing, I mean, 2 out of 3 not going to finish doesn't tell me much, but with this line like that, you have some interesting possibilities and chances. So Rafael Fiziev is the favorite, and that is a logical line of thought given that Green is coming off a loss, and he does seem to be on a tear. And normally here, I would pick Green, ground game favoritism, experience in the UFC, all the things I like picking. But something in my gut wants me to pick Fiziev. I think part of the issue is that Green, in his wins, has not been showing this dominant, I can actually put you to sleep, the power I have is worth it. So I don't know if Fiziev is afraid of him. And Fiziev has some presence of ground in his career, and it's important to note that maybe he's better. We have 3 fights in the UFC versus the many more that Bobby Green has. It means that there's a few questions on the table here, and it's important to see what we end up with.
Alright, second fight of the prelims is the 16-3 Casey Kenny taking on Kung Fu Monkey Yaodong Song, with a 1-inch height and reach advantage favoring Song. Kenny is yet another fighter on this card with basically dead even strikes absorbed to strikes thrown. Jesus, there's a lot of them actually, I'm realizing. But also has a fairly consistent takedown presence in his fight, averaging 1.1 across his fights. Additionally, he does have decent takedown defense, 59%, which means if he wants to, he can keep it on the feet. And that's an important thing to know about these takedown defense stats, is that sometimes a fighter will have bad takedown defense. That's because they're fine going to the ground. They're like, oh no, I'm on my back, I can fight from here just fine. It's important to note that. But back on topic, Song is an incredibly similar fighter. His strikes absorbed is actually lower than his strikes thrown. Also having a lower takedown defense, but a higher accuracy, meaning he's probably more realistically to go to the ground. He's going to be the aggressor in this situation. This fight looks to be fairly dead even across the board. They're very similar skill sets, very similar trajectories and style of fighting. Vegas odds reflect my sentiment, but I feel like the key to this fight is momentum, and I feel like Kenny has more of that, coming off a split decision loss to Dominic than Song with his unanimous decision loss to Kyler Phillips. This is completely conjecture, and I'm going to be wrong. Torres Hill is the end of the prelims. 12-5, Tiny Tornado Torres, looking to take out the 13-9 Overkill Hill, with the best name so far in this card. Torres being 5 years younger and 2 inches shorter, though Hill does have a 4-inch reach advantage. Torres looks like a decently well-rounded fighter. Takedowns not being incredibly prevalent, but something they definitely have in the repertoire of use. Additionally, they can throw submissions and do have a submission win, but it's not major. It's not something you see often. It's just kind of in their bag of tricks, they have a submission. Additionally, striking accuracy is a little low at 47%, but I'm nitpicking at this point. Seems like a well-rounded fighter. Seems like their game is fairly encompassing. They're able to go to different areas in the fight. Hill, on the other hand, shows the takedown a little more, but also focuses a bit on the striking. Seems to be a little weak to being submitted based on losses. Additionally, in close striking fights, Hill does tend to lose in the long run. A majority of her wins, she tends to outstrike her opponents. That's an important thing to note as well looking at this fight, is that if the fight is close, it seems that Hill loses the momentum of the fight. Hill is not able to keep on top. They start to give ground and give up the appearance of losing the fight. But looking at this fight, it is definitely close and the odds favor Hill, and I'm actually going to follow that as well. Mostly based on the fact that her strikes landed per minute is about 2 points higher than Torres, and I don't really see this fight going to the ground. I don't think either fighter's too in mind with must go to canvas, and I feel like being able to throw more strikes and landing more strikes, you have a chance to overwhelm Hill, and if not, you're going to keep the fight close at least. And that's, I think, where Hill is vulnerable, is those close fights. But we're finally on to the main card. And we start with Luque Chiesa. The 18-4 Michael Maverick Chiesa looks to keep his win streak going against 20-7 Vincent Silent Assassin Luque. 4-year age gap driving Luque, but a 2-inch height advantage to Chiesa. Chiesa is definitely a ground-heavy fighter, averaging 3.6 takedowns across his career, and in literally every fight but one, he has at least a single takedown. He seems fairly good at submissions from the ground, but is also able to just go the distance controlling a fight on the ground. Just being on top, controlling position, dealing damage. His striking is most definitely not his focus. About even across the landed and absorbed, but also really low in terms of quantity. In a 5-round fight against Neil Magny, he had 24 strikes and 15 minutes of ground control. Comparatively, Luque is much more striking heavy across his fights, and has never actually been finished in a UFC fight. Back on topic though, his focus is striking, and specifically this kind of swang and bang. He has basically an equal amount of landed to absorbed, but the average per fight across his career is 5.74 to 5.78, and this is per minute. Lands a lot more and gets hit a lot more compared to Chiesa. Additionally, Luque has finished 2 people by submission. It does not seem to be his focus. He wants to be on feet. He wants to be up top. But it is something he can do. It's one of the, again, I've mentioned a few times, it's a bag of tricks situation. It's, I'm on the ground, I'm in position, I can throw this. Vegas odds do favor Luque, but something in my gut, probably my stupid favoritism for liking grapplers, I'm going to go with Chiesa. I don't think this fight is going to be finished. I don't think Luque gets knocked out. I don't think he even gets submitted. But I think Chiesa has a decent shot of surprising Luque with a takedown and grinding out winning rounds. It'd probably be split decision, but I think Chiesa has a good chance of grinding out a win here. Might not be exciting, might not be thrilling, but I think Chiesa can win. 34-year-old, 29-7 Jose Junior Aldo takes on the equally old 19-5 Pedro the Young Punisher Munoz, with 5 inches of reach and an inch height to Aldo. Now, Jose Aldo has been rocking the fight game for a long time and stands out as a striker, about an even landed to absorb ratio, but additionally they do have a very solid takedown defense, keeping the fight on the feet at 91%. He has been a bit streaky as of late, which I feel is important to notice, but he is coming off a win against Marlon Vera, and is important to consider. Looking at Munoz, you see a very similar thing. He does tend to throw a little more in the striking, but does a bit worse in the takedown defense. Comparing their skills, it's a little difficult to point out who I can directly say is better. But at least in my mind, it comes down to striking defense. Aldo is about a 61% across his fights, meaning that he's able to avoid 61% of strikes, at least significant damage. Munoz about 58%. And two guys who like to throw punches and two guys who are strikers, those are numbers I think that are important. Who's going to get hit more? Who's going to take the most damage throughout these rounds? Vegas calls the fight for Aldo, and I have to agree based on the striking defense. I nitpick on numbers a lot, but I feel like it just tells me something about the fighter that I can also kind of look back and see across their fights. I don't think either fighter wants to go to the ground, and I think even if Munoz goes for it, Aldo can keep it on the feet, and if worse comes to worse, can survive on the ground and get back and get to the next round. Now for the main event, which I still don't get why this is a main event, but it is. 25-7-1, Derek Black Beast Lewis looks to secure his #1 challenger spot against the 9-0 Cyril Bongamin Gan. Now Gan is 2 inches taller, a little bit lighter, and 5 years younger than Lewis, 36-31. Derek Lewis is very much the heavyweight here. He is a striker who is willing to hit and get hit, given that his landed and absorbed ratio is close to equal. Part of that, however, is the fact that Lewis has got power in spades and is able to put someone out with a solid shot. He also has the ability to get up off the ground. We've seen it multiple times where he's taken some shots and then changed position, gotten back to the feet, and put in the fight where he wants it. It's not something he tends to use a lot. He likes to stay on his feet. A lot of heavyweights do. Gan, on the other hand, seems to be a bit more technical with his striking, leading to a greater difference in landed to absorbed, but also a bit of a difference in how he strikes. He seems to pick and choose his shots instead of trying to remove somebody's head. He does seem to have some takedown game and 2 submission wins. They seem to come sparingly, only when he decides to use it. And I'm not saying he doesn't have knockout power. He does. But his strikes go differently than Lewis's, which is punch to face equals dead. And those are kind of the stats. And obviously you're going to say, looking at how they fight, Bongamin's the better fighter, right? But I run into an issue with this. Gan is the favorite. From a technical perspective, it makes sense. The better ground game, more technical striking, well-rounded game, looks a lot more athletic. But it's Derek Lewis. Lewis just wins fights. He has last-second knockouts, come from behind knockouts. He's throwing punches that don't look like they do anything. He knocked out Curtis Blades on what looked like a half an uppercut. And he always seems to be able to win these damn fights. Now, I'm picking Gan because I'm looking at the numbers, and I feel like Gan can make it to the end, not get knocked out, and win by points. But if Derek Lewis comes out in the last round with a minute left and takes Gan's head off, I will not even be remotely surprised anymore. Because Derek Lewis is just Derek Lewis and wins fights. It doesn't make sense. It's the whole idea like, takedown defense, just stand up. Losing a fight, just knock the dude out. It's just infuriating sometimes. But as my throat begins to hurt, that's kind of the overview of UFC 265. Interesting card, questions being asked, good look to the future for who's going to fight who going forward. I think it's a lot of fun. I look forward to some of the fights on this card. Hopefully you enjoyed the video.